Okay, now that I'm home, looking a little rough. Got the dog trying to get in the house, but I'm going to just like record a Jeep tour. This is not only helpful for anybody who wants to know what it looks like, what I've been living in, but so I remember for next summer when I hopefully do this again, what we did the first time, because I'll talk about stuff that I liked or like didn't like and would have added or wouldn't have added, kind of a thing. So that'll all be within this. So without like too much talking, let's just get right into that. Okay, so starting here in the back, we have, of course, the curtains that come out and across. But what I really want to show you is the table that we have that slides out. So I actually love this. This would have been great had I been to more campgrounds, but I didn't end up using it as much as I thought, considering I spent most of my time in Walmart parking lots, so I wasn't like necessarily just lounging behind my car. I typically spent most of my time inside. Opening it is a bit of a challenge because of the cushion, but either way, we have the table that folds out. What?
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, you're sitting.
No, I'm recording the whole tour. Anyways. But then you have to flip that up to get it back in, but then that tucks away. I also, you learned to utilize a lot of your space. So that's where I kept my mini chair, which I would easily bring in my backpack whenever I went anywhere. So that perfectly just fits right next to the entire frame. I don't think I had any room on that side, but that's pretty much what we have going on out back here. Now, coming into the Jeep, we have this shelf that we screwed into. If you look on this side, these bolts that hold my hard top on to the Jeep, we took the wood and we screwed it in between the bolt and this lip on the side. So that's how this is in, and we cut it around the roll bar that I ended up decorating with my leaves. So this shelf ended up being one of the most useful things we put into my Jeep. This is what we held all of the storage bins in, and within these storage bins I had stuff like cups, books, cleaning supplies, and this was my toolkit that had everything I would have needed in case something were to break or needed to be fixed. My dad helped me put everything in here, but I would just close these and I would just stack them for storage and got everything off my bed. The only thing about this shelf that I would change is having something to secure what's on here in place, so that way when I'm driving I could leave it up and it wouldn't fall off, because having to put everything on the bed and then switch it to all up here became pretty inconvenient when I wanted to just do a quick stop and relax back here. It just pretty much kept me in the front seat more, because it was just too much of a hassle to take everything off of the bed and put it on this shelf when I would ideally like to be able to keep it up there and not have to worry about it. Coming around to the other side now, we have our panel of electronics. So this has a bunch of switches. If we zoom in, there are 3 buttons. One controls my lights, I believe. One controls my plug for my outlets, because this is where I could charge my devices. This one particularly was the fastest, so this is where I would plug my stuff in every night. And this one is the one that turns on my fan, which actually really, let me turn that off, actually really pushes out some good air. And the fan clips to this seatbelt, so we just were able to mount it like that, and it can actually be turned so it can rest facing that way, rest facing this way. I normally had it like this when I was sitting, because when I was sitting I often had my pillow, this one, resting up against this door and driver's seat, but when I was laying down I had my head over by this tailgate So I would just flip back and forth between the two. We had these exhaust fans that we would put in the windows. However, they broke pretty easily when they fell out of my window, because when I would roll the window down in the morning to take them out, they would stick to the top of the window. So by the time that they fell, the window would already be rolled down, so they would fall out. So what I had to do after a while was roll it down a crack, let it fall back onto the window, and then lower it. So they ended up both breaking that way, but that's fine. These are the pots and pans that I brought with me in case I wanted to do any cooking, and I went to use them for the first time when I was at a campground in South Dakota, but that was the last time I was at a campground, and I wasn't comfortable ever cooking in a Walmart because they're normally nice enough to let you spend the night there. I didn't want to do a whole tailgate. But coming over to this little panel controller, this is all about my solar panels that I have on top of the roof. I'm not too familiar with the electronics in my Jeep. My dad did a lot of that, and we never spent too much time going over it. This is how I turn my overhead lights on and off. This one normally would fall out when I was driving, but when I would park, I would clip it to up here. I normally use two hands, but I have their wires just wrapped around my roll bar as well within these leaves. I also had fairy like twinkle lights rolled around it too, but after about 2 days those stopped working. But those are battery powered, so they're on their complete own energy. But these lights are straight from my solar panel, so to turn those on and off I would use this button right here. So that was always pretty easy. This told me how many volts my solar panels were giving me in my battery for powering everything. It turned out we didn't have enough electricity to power the fan, lights, phone chargers, and refrigerator. So everything was powered fine except for the small fridge that we had put in. After a while, if I move this, it started just saying E1, which meant not enough voltage, and then it would flash to, on occasion, what the temperature was at. I think it just said somewhere in the 60s, like 69 maybe. So this ended up not working out. We would need more solar power if we were to go ahead and use this again in the future. If not, this would have been good for extra storage because that was something we were definitely lacking. And if we could find a way to put more somewhere in here, that would have been really helpful. So during the night, every single window had its own curtain. This side is two. The other one's tucked behind here right now, so I won't take that out. But these would both slide to cover this back window. This window had its own that slid across, as well as the passenger doors, the back doors, passenger door, driver's side. And for the front windshield, we actually have these two foam core cutouts that we would, when I say we, I mean I, that I would take and I would place behind, sorry for the bad angle, I would have to move my rear view mirror out of the way, and I would slip this behind the dash, and that little cutout goes around the rear view mirror, and then this comes back into place after I put the other one behind the other side. So once those were both in, this is how I blocked my front windshield, and like I said, every single window aside from that had their own curtain that I would come and bring down. One thing that I would have done just to add a little bit would have been putting some sort of magnet or Velcro on the side of this, because these didn't ever fill this small gap. So what I used to do was tuck it into the crack of right there, and even though that's not like super inconvenient, if I had to like add something, it would just be nice to like magnet that like right there, just like for the night. Same thing on like these little sides, although I discovered that like this part of the door, actually you can't actually see through my tint, but would cover the crack right here. So this side, not as much, but this side would be nice just to have like a little magnet on the passenger and driver's side door. All of the plastic bags that I would collect from grocery stores all got shoved in here, which is where we actually had to pop off the small piece that was covering this, because in order to open the gate from the inside, you actually have to pull down, if I can find it real quick, on this lever right here in order to open it, because the handle obviously is on the outside, but there's nothing on the inside. So if you just find that little lever with your hand on the inside, you can open this from the inside of the car. Nice thing would be if we could figure out a way to like add a little more leverage to pull that down, because sometimes it was a little harder, inconvenient to like get your hand in there and like really get it to pull down, but I'm sure that wouldn't be too difficult. Once again, not as much of a complaint, just if we have more time next time in preparation before I leave. These are little things that would have been nice that I didn't figure out until I left. So when I was getting ready to go to sleep, I normally had a little bit more stuff in here, and I've been withholding unpacking until I filmed this video, but everything I had either ended up in the passenger seat or the front seat for the night. I normally just worried about that in the morning, but everything would end up on the shelf like I talked about, because I would be sleeping on the bed, and I normally got it on the side of the cooler because it was easier to get over this than it was to just step right onto the bed. But what I would do was this blanket would be picked up, and every pillow had its purpose. We had one pillow down here that I would use to sleep with. This pillow was moved around constantly, and if I close this door, I had one pillow that covered the fridge that just created a continuation of my mattress really right over that. And since I'm about 6 feet tall almost, I would have one pillow go over the center console, and this last pillow would go in this corner for when I woke up. I would always flop up and lean on that. But I would put my head down here, and then my feet would end up between the two seats, and they're not too far. I would, turn and move around all night, but I could always lay flat because I had that gap between the front seat, and when this pillow was on it, it was incredibly comfortable. I can't really think of anything for what I would change or do differently when it came to the bed situation, because honestly, I was more comfortable sleeping in my Jeep most of the time than I was in a hotel room I stayed in Las Vegas for that day. But so yeah, I would often go to somebody's house, or not often, but the few times that I did, a lot of them would offer a guest room, and I actually denied it because I was just more comfortable in my Jeep, like physically, and it just like was less trouble bringing all of my stuff in when I could just sleep out here. My only complaint, which there's not really anything we could have done about, was the temperature. When it was hot, it was hot. That's what woke me up a lot of the time, was that my Jeep would just be baking in the sun since it has a black hardtop on. So I would wake up and I would just be like sweating, but like normally throughout the night, I never had much trouble sleeping in here because when it was dark, it wasn't as hot. But once the sun rose and it started cooking the inside of the Jeep, I would wake up pretty quickly and open the doors and go inside. Once you open this back passenger door, you see that this is where I have this pillow that I would lean or rest on. So we'll just move that and these out of the way for now so I can show you. This mattress was a few layers of memory foam. This is actually one mattress, and then this was just an extra one I had on an old bed that we cut to fit in here as well. These were incredibly comfortable, and I just used twin XL sheets to cover it, and then this was all just on a piece of plywood that had 2x4 support beams going all the way to the back. On this side, I often would store my shoes, my tripod, and my chair that I would keep in here. So that would all just lay nicely right here. It was covered all by that pillow. But in order to open the back, you have to put the front seat forward a little bit. But once you do that, underneath here, we actually have hinges on both sides in order to access here for extra storage. for things mostly that I wasn't going to use daily. Like, this is an emergency survival kit, my first aid kit, extra oil, coolant, these containers I didn't end up needing but brought just in case, and I actually did end up using more than I originally started with, so I'm glad I did that. This is also where all the electronics are stored. So these are the 2 batteries for the solar panels. So this is where all the energy is stored. And this is the converter we brought in case I ever needed to jump my battery or just need a little extra power. I had 2 sets of ratchet straps in case I wanted to ratchet strap my 2 doors together to make me feel safer, so that if someone like were to break into my car, they couldn't, because the doors wouldn't open whether they were locked or unlocked. But I didn't end up doing that because I felt safer than I thought I would. I ended up having to buy an umbrella, not for the rain, but actually for the sun when I was at Arches National Park, but that also gets stored down here. So this is kind of, whenever something gets lifted up, you kind of normally have to just tuck it back down, but really nothing too crazy. So that was most of the stuff in the back. Now if we come up to the front, this is a lot more just storage, and this is where I would probably make a few adjustments to what we had already done. So like I said, I no longer have all of my stuff in here, but storage was probably my biggest complaint. There's not much we could have done about that, considering the Jeep is only so big. But putting this back in the back seat, I had to put a towel on my front seat because after driving for 8 or 9 hours, I figured out that it just, you kind of get like sweaty. So like this just absorbed better than my actual seat that I have. And then on the back of this headrest, I kept my hat because, as you can see on that one, that little buckle would catch my hair all the time. I would have liked to add some sort of cushioning to right here, because I normally shoved like a blanket right here for my elbow because it would start to get really painful because of how hard it is. But just adding some sort of like cushioning here, which I'm sure wouldn't be too difficult, would have been pretty nice after I learned that it was not as nice resting my arm on that after about 4 hours of driving. The last thing I want to show in this video is actually the passenger seat where I kept most of my storage. I want to show you guys this, and I kept most of my stuff in here when I got home just so I could highlight where I really kept everything. This is really just all of my clothes and a spare curtain I had in case those weren't enough, but they ended up being plenty. I had like miscellaneous things like toilet paper I would just throw around up here, a speaker, and like sunscreen, but I kept my case of water right here, and it was a good idea to bring water. However, I could probably get away with bringing like half of what I brought for water, because most of the water I drank was from fast food places because I wanted to get ice with it. I kept my towel underneath this for whenever I showered. This is a mask, not the point, because if this was ever dripping after I got out of the shower, I wanted that to catch it. But I kept my cooking gear right there because I didn't end up cooking, so I made it one of the least accessible things. My bathing suits, because I was normally not close to water, and then I just had my laundry stuff right there. The one thing I would change, and this is probably like the biggest thing for next time, is having some sort of organizer built into this front seat so everything is much easier to access and it's not falling over, because as you can see, everything's just stacked right on top of each other. And when I had more stuff, like all the souvenirs I ended up getting or just whatever, it could get stacked up to about here, just to the point where I could still see my mirror, but just barely below that. So I would just do something that created some sort of storage system that I could stack stuff on and not have to worry about it falling over when I was driving, because that did happen sometimes. And just one last little remark before I end this video is it would have been cool if when we do build that, if we had some sort of extra cup holders, because I normally had more than 2 drinks, which I only have 2 cup holders, and my hydro flask actually doesn't fit in those, so I normally had to shove that right between this duffel bag and center console. But that is the whole Jeep. That and the fact that on the trip, I ended up decorating it with all of the places, or most of the places, that I had driven to. So, that's it.